Welcome back to the Minute Initiative. Today we're going to be talking about practical medical preparedness, things you can do, things that are worth understanding, education you can get, some different gear you can carry. And to help us talk about that, we're bringing in Joshua Rosenquist, who is an active paramedic and firefighter in the Milwaukee area. So he's got a lot of experience, a lot of real hands-on knowledge to share with us. So we're really thankful to have him on the podcast, and we hope you enjoy the episode. Dude, I need to get down to visit you in Milwaukee so we can go to Green Bay. I still haven't been to Green Bay yet.
I'm into that. Yeah.
Dude.
Especially if you want to go to a game.
I do want to go
in
to
the fire service around Milwaukee area. Everybody has season tickets that you know. Like I've got like 3 or 4 guys that have tickets.
Dude.
To like one guy's got one like 50-yard line. He said like 12 rows back, whatever.
And does Green Bay do, I'm pretty sure they're the team that does this. They don't really actually have like seats for sale. It's only like people basically only have reserved seats, and that's the only way you can get them.
Let's see here. So
like
one
there's
guy,
like lifetime season holders or
yes.
something?
So one guy that I work with, he only got his tickets because his great grandpa got on the list to get the tickets. So like there's so many people on the list.
Yeah.
By the time you get tickets, it's like your grandkids are going to be the ones benefiting from the season tickets. So he's had them in his family for
so much history.
So long. So he's got these phenomenal tickets that just fell in his lap because he was in the right gene pool, I guess. To get, yeah. He's just like,
that's pretty wild. Like when me and Cody went to that game.
Yeah.
The people that were sitting next to us was like, oh yeah, you're in, I can't remember the guy's name, but Jimmy's, you got seats from Jimmy. Like they knew who the people were that I bought the tickets from because of where I was sitting in the stadium.
And they kind of protect each other because, like, you know, certain people get pretty rowdy at games, and it's like, you know, hey, how are my guests for my seats? I'm like, dude, don't sell tickets to those guys again. They were terrible. Because you can get in trouble for, like, you know, you represent your seats. So if like you get in trouble for something you sold to whoever you sold them to,
that's actually like, so amazing.
It's kind of cool to
go there even more.
So your seat neighbors would look out for you, be like, dude, don't give them tickets ever again.
Yeah. So. Well, it sucks because I'm a diehard Packers fan and I still haven't been there yet. It just hasn't worked out. Like I've almost gone, but I actually was going to go. My wife was going to take me there for my 30th birthday, but then COVID happened. COVID happened. I'm almost 32.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
that means you need to get down.
I do. I need to make it happen. And then Steven's not even a Packers fan at all, and he's been. So it's like, what the heck's going on?
I know. Didn't you go for the Cowboys or something like that?
Yeah. So my best friend growing up is a Packers fan.
Yeah.
I'm a Cowboys fan. So we came down.
Oh, that works perfect.
We saw you and your family and then went over. I think we were only there for like the weekend, though. We were only there. It was like a short trip.
I remember that. Yeah, it was really quick.
But, yeah, we were on the...
So when Cody just blended perfectly with the Rosenquist family?
Yeah, he just kind of meshed right in.
He just belonged.
I remember the whole time, like, he was just quiet, you know?
Yeah, but just there.
Yeah.
Just giving the head nods.
Yep.
That's great.
Pap liked him a lot.
That's awesome. Yeah,
he was like, you're a man of many words there, Cody. And basically just being sarcastic.
Yeah.
But I think Pap enjoyed that, you know, like, because he was kind of, you know, he'd just sit back and watch the room as well.
Yeah.
So
that's perfect. We were there recently, actually. Lambeau hosted I'm a big soccer fan. They hosted Manchester City and Bayern Munich, which are 2 big international soccer teams.
Yeah.
And I went out there for the game, and it was kind of an interesting blend of cultures because you got like Packers and Lambeau, which is like Wisconsin to a core. Like they're not soccer fans. Like these guys are going, and they sold these tickets to the ticket holders first. So there was actually a lot of Packer fans just going because they wanted to experience what soccer was like.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Nice.
So it was a weird blend of culture. So like pregame, we're going out and there's like country music at some of the bars. We're crushing cheese curds, like stupid amount of cheese curds. There's beer everywhere.
Dude.
And it's 0% like international soccer vibe, and then there's just a bunch of people walking around in soccer jerseys. So it was like just this weird mesh of like Lambeau, Wisconsin, and then like international soccer chants, and like it was cool. It was a pretty cool vibe. So
I don't know much about soccer, but is Manchester City and Manchester United the same thing, or is
they're two different teams?
Okay, see, I could probably get castrated for.
Yeah, you definitely would. If
you
were to go over, they'd be like, "Oh, you guys are the same team.
What's wrong with you, mate?
Yeah, they
get out of here."
Yeah, it's a religion over there. It's like no.
Are they the same?
Yeah, exactly. That's spot on.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's Lambeau for you.
Dude. So how are the cheese curds there?
Dude, that.
Is that how you feel after you eat them? You're just
man. Me and your dad were talking about squeaky cheese curds.
Yep.
And some people are like, "What? The cheese squeaks?" I'm like, "Yeah, you bite into it squeaks."
Yeah, it's got that little.
So like you know, you guys have had Wisconsin cheese. It's kind of almost on another, not everywhere, but it's on another level than a good chunk of the states.
Yeah.
But they had some cheese curds there, and it was like they were like,
me that?
"Oh yeah. $8 for a thing of cheese curds." I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, $8 for cheese curds. I'm like, this is expensive. It's just a bar. Like they're just making it. They were literally making it under like a little tent. And I was just like, $8. And then the guy's like, "Yeah, try them." So he gives me like a couple cheese curds before I buy, and I'm like, I'm in. I'm into.
Dude, he sampled you in.
He sampled me, and
they
were delightful. And then it came in like those classic little boats, classic boats, and I'm thinking like, oh, that's not gonna. He's probably gonna put like just a little bit on there, but he put the little. We're big on ranch with our cheese curds, so that was what he suggested. He's like, yeah, get the ranch with it. So we had a little dipping ranch, and then he put the cheese curds on. You couldn't even see the ranch container because there were so many cheese curds. I felt bad, but I threw some away because we were going to the game. And I don't like to throw food away, but I was like, I can't have any more cheese in my body. Like I have, I ordered.
I have to pass this.
I have to pass. It was me, my friend, and my brother.
Dude, just becoming the packer, dude.
Dude, I was packed. I was seriously packed with cheese curds. Like it was ridiculous. We each ordered one, thinking like a little side. We all got like a burger and cheese curds. Yeah. We're thinking like, it's like a little side of fries, a little side of cheese curds, same thing.
Yeah.
But no, dude, that was a main meal. That was the course. That was lunch, dinner, tomorrow's breakfast. It was so much food, but it was great. Yeah. Cheese curds.
Did you have any while you were there, Steven?
Yeah. So, I don't know if I want to get into my story because it's kind of a disgrace to the Packers.
What? So when I went talking to a Cowboy fan, we should just not.
Yeah, I might not be able to go back to Lambeau after I tell the story, but we're going to tell it anyways because it's a pretty good one.
I like it. We're living life on the edge. It's good.
So me and Cody, we go there. I can't even remember what that bar was called that was there, but we got there early, obviously, because we're like, well, we got to experience Lambeau. Like he's super pumped. It's his first time at Lambeau. It's my first time at Lambeau. I'm a Cowboys fan, but still, I still enjoy it because obviously you were a Packers fan growing up, so it's like it's cool,
Yeah.
It's like, and like their stadium is probably the coolest stadium. Like as far as football goes, like
culture.
Yeah, they have
still bleachers.
Like they still have like the wooden bleachers and like it's pretty legit. Anyways,
that's sick.
It's small. It's the whole town is literally just that stadium, and everything else is just like houses and farms, and like you said, churches and bars, basically.
Church bar, Lambeau.
yeah.
That order.
So we went there and we're like, oh, let's get some cheese curds while we're here. We can't go without getting cheese curds. Well,
for sure.
We're getting cheese curds, and he goes to the bathroom. He's like, man, that bathroom was crazy. And I'm gonna explain it. People are gonna know exactly which bar I was at now, but he's like, it was crazy. It's like the whole floor is pennies in there. Have you been in that bar?
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember which one that one's called. I know exactly which one you're talking about.
So it's in Lambeau. It's like as soon as we walked in, it's like right there on the right. Let me back it up just a little bit, because when we got there, there's a huge line to even get in. So we waited in line for like, I don't know, 45 minutes just to get in. We get in, we get served cheese curds and stuff. He goes and takes a leak. Then I go and take a leak. Well, then he's like, all right, let's get out of here. We're like, all right, yeah, we're good. So we dip out. As we're leaving, we'd already exited all the way out. He goes, you paid, right? And I go, no, I thought you paid.
Oh, no.
Because they came in and they just kept serving us. Like, they served us multiple things of cheese curds. So I was just like, whatever, like this must be how it goes. I don't know how this works. Like I guess it was like a bar tab basically of cheese curds, which is weird to me. Like they were like keeping track of it.
You want to start a tab? Yeah. All right, here comes your cards.
Round one.
Yeah, it was crazy. But anyways,
Need refill?
we ended up getting out, and he goes, "Dude, we gotta go back and pay." Well, and then I look at the line, and the line has gotten even bigger, and I'm like, "Dude, we'll come back and pay them next time we come back."
We don't got
down.
time.
Like, we don't got time to be sitting in that line. We gotta go get our seats. So, yeah. Long story short, I stole some cheese curds from Green Bay.
Dude, that's hilarious.
Oh boy.
Oh,
It happens.
man.
It's crazy.
It happens. You know,
It
it's a
happens.
common thing to happen.
Yeah, it's a common
you
thing.
You get served up with
They take their losses where they can.
refills of cheese curds,
Yeah.
and you just sometimes you gotta hit the road.
Yeah, he thought I paid when he was using the bathroom, and I didn't even think about it. I just kind of was like, "Oh yeah."
You just thought it was like complimentary.
No, I didn't think it was complimentary.
Oh, okay.
I just didn't think about it.
I didn't know
It's
if your
like
head
cheese
you're like,
curds.
oh, it's like peanuts or something. You know, like you're just getting
Bar-
cheese
like
curded
Texas
up. Dude.
Roadhouse.
Yeah, that would be sick.
Yeah, just cheese curds on
I
the
mean,
side.
maybe it was. Maybe I didn't have to. No, I'm sure I was supposed to pay for it, but it was
You
weird
were.
though.
That's funny. That's hilarious.
Well,
It was
we'll,
bad.
we'll get into it now. So with us, we got Joshua, which is actually
hello.
our cousin.
Yep.
If you didn't figure that out already. But yeah, he's up from the Milwaukee area, and he works as a paramedic firefighter. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. If you just want to start jumping into that, we'll
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit.
I work for North Shore Fire Department, which we're a little suburb. We have 5 stations. We cover 7 different cities just to the northeast of Milwaukee, but we aid Milwaukee pretty regularly. We're there probably multiple times a day, covering the city as well. So we are pretty much just an elbow of Milwaukee's fire department. We help them with fire calls, EMS calls, pretty much everything that they need. We're kind of backup for them, which is more frequent than not. I've been there for just over 3 years. I'm going to be going on my 4th year here, coming into 23. So yeah, I've been paramedic since 2018, so 5 years, and then been working for almost 4 years for the North Shore.
Sweet.
As firefighter paramedic. So
Right on.
Yeah. So it's been good stuff. Yeah. So as far as what I do primarily, in the city, we run like about 75 to 80% EMS calls to fire calls. So we respond on both rigs, but whether you're stationed to an ambulance or stationed to a heavy piece, being an engine or a truck, both rigs will go on both calls. So everybody who is employed in the North Shore is EMS trained and fire trained. So we can kind of dual purpose on whatever call comes in.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like it's a good way to do it.
It's a great way to do it. It keeps us diverse. A big thing in the fire service and EMS in general is sometimes you don't see or do a skill for a long period of time. So when you can kind of change your role, you can really keep yourself well sharpened in all different skills, because you're doing your EMS side, you're doing your fire side, you're being able to practice different things, train in different roles, and work with different people, and keeps you well-rounded and ready to go for whatever comes in. So
Nice.
It's kind of a nice.
You enjoy it?
Oh yeah. Yep. I kind of had an interesting career path. I originally went to a 4-year college for athletic training. Ended up deciding I didn't want to do that, and kind of fell in this period of time where I was like, I don't know what I want to do. And then I knew I wanted to do something medical. I started talking to one of the advisors because I got interested in emergency medical services, and then I was also thinking about nursing. And I was like, hey, what's this paramedic stuff about? He's like, paramedic's great, but you might want to consider fire as well. Are you afraid of running into burning buildings? I was like, no way, I'm into that. That sounds awesome. So I ended up, just jumping onto the fire side as well. And I'm just as much in love with the fire side as I am with the EMS.
Perfect.
So it just kind of fell into my lap, and now I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. So
Nice.
It's kind of awesome. So
What was the reason he recommended both sides of it?
a big part of it was he knew I had a wife and we were going to be starting a family. As far as in the city areas, being in just EMS, a lot of times financially it's not as good.
Oh, okay.
So working just for like a private ambulance, a lot of times their pay is not quite as good as working for a state or city
Gotcha.
department. So
pay wise,
yeah, you get, we're in a union. You get a lot of benefits. So like health and retirement, things like that. You're just more set off. And then overall your salary is typically higher than a private ambulance. So
that's good to know, I guess. Yeah. If someone's looking to do that career field, I guess.
Yeah. And then,
and how does that work? Like going from, because I assume they get just EMTs as well that are working fire.
Yep.
And so you don't have to be paramedic to be.
Correct. Every department's a little different. But our department is, we have EMTs and paramedics.
Okay.
And so we have certain ambulance that are required to have paramedics, and then we have certain ambulance that are not. And so, the EMTs can be on those ambulance, and then you have to at least have your EMT to work for our fire department. But some don't even have that. Some fire departments, you can just have your first responder. And
just like BLS or something?
Yeah, just basic first responder training, and they just have, and then they're fire 1, fire 2 training. So, but our fire department, you have to have at least EMT, and a culture is kind of changing in Wisconsin. Illinois has been doing it for a while, where all the suburbs, your paramedic is minimum, and our fire department has been trying to get more paramedics, and so we've been hiring strictly paramedics for the last 7 years. So there's been that, and actually we've kind of jumped back a little bit just because of lack of people wanting to work or just wanting to be in the fire service. We've had to kind of start hiring EMTs, and then we require them to go through schooling to get their paramedic, but we're hiring now EMTs, and then with the idea that they'll eventually be a paramedic.
Okay.
So
nice.
Kind of a weird time for us right now, but.
So it sounds like it's been a depreciation then, and like amount of people that are interested in that kind of work.
I think everybody's kind of feeling that in almost every
industry.
Every industry is feeling that, but in the fire service, we've had a pretty high, at least in the southeastern part of Wisconsin, there's a high retirement right now. There's a lot of people that are retiring, and so there's a lot of need and then there's also a decrease in applicants. So like I was talking to a guy, he's about 45, so he's been in the department somewhere around, I don't know, 10, 15, 18 years, somewhere in there. And he said when he got hired, when he applied, there was over 300 people that applied for the same position that he applied for.
Dang.
Right now, we just had applicants come in. We only had 8 apply.
Whoa.
So like that tells you the difference from now to when
insane.
he applied about 15, 18 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's a big difference. The culture of hiring has definitely changed, and that's shown a little bit of, you might be able to speak to this in your career, but like we've had a lot of overtime. We've had a lot of people getting ordered to work just because the number of employees we have is a lot smaller, and just the availability. So we're pretty thin in the Milwaukee area as far as people needing to work. And I think everybody's,
which is crazy because you have such a larger hiring pool, but I guess there's more jobs there too. So it's like more options for people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think all that stuff, I think law enforcement, first responders, military, they're all seeing a huge like drop as far as like applicants or people that are even interested in taking those jobs. I mean, you look at our military, they're hurt. That was like the job. It wasn't like a job fair, but it was basically like a school came to talk to our business about like kind of how we started this business and whatnot. And we asked if anyone there was even thinking about the military. And it's like, I remember when I was in school, there's like like a lot of people in my class were wanting to go to the military, or people I just knew in general that were graduating. And I just feel like that's gone way down. Like people aren't interested in that right now.
For sure.
Well, I think that speaks to an overall societal shift that we've seen. Like it's, being willing or, being raised up. Maybe it's not even raised up, but I just think the willingness to, help one another, help others, go into that kind of protector, guardian, rescue kind of role is just, it's almost gone. I mean, it's thankfully there's still people doing it, but
yeah, for sure.
I think it's, it's a big issue that we see today, and it's not, it's not cool anymore. It's not, it's all about, I mean, generally it's like everyone's career path is, I want to be a YouTuber or something like that. Trade work's gone way down to like drastically low levels. But, especially that role of responder / protector, service, like service work in general, I think is public service work has gone down a lot. And I think it speaks a lot to, like I said, it's kind of where our society is shifting to as a whole, which is not good. So, I mean, that's a huge thing that we try to talk about on this podcast is being responsible. It's personal responsibility, being willing to actually help others, going out of your way to prepare yourself mentally and physically.
Yep.
To, be there for people. So that's kind of what we want to talk about today. And we have, Josh here to help us with his background and kind of explain, different things that he's been seeing. And we're going to talk about just overall practical preparedness medically, maybe even getting into some emergency stuff as well. But I think this is such an important thing. We see it right now in Ukraine. There's a massive gap between general medical information and knowledge that just the everyday people have there and, some of their actual medical professionals. And Russia just started flooding into Ukraine. And we've talked about this multiple times in our podcast, but the gap between what the just everyday person knows. I mean, people don't even know CPR, super simple stuff, things that could very easily save someone, are just not being used there. It's gotten better because of all the massive influx of information and education and supplies that have been pushed into that country. But, that's just one example. I mean, that's a current example we see now, but we see it, every day within our own nation, just people that weren't sure what to do. I mean, I see videos all the time of like, thankfully this guy had a dechoker or whatever. Just people not knowing the Heimlich maneuver, things like that, where, people are standing around for minutes while their kid's like choking to death. And it's like, simple interventions can be done with a lot of this stuff. And it's not hard to learn it. It's actually super available. It's super affordable. So anyways, we just kind of want to get into that. It's something that we're going to continue to readdress in this podcast. We actually did a podcast on responder mindset, and I would encourage you to go check that out. It was several episodes ago, but if you look up responder mindset, it's kind of getting in that mentality or getting in that headspace or practicing getting in that headspace of where to be as a responder, kind of focusing on, selflessness and being willing to help others in need. I think that's not only is it, something that can make our community better, but, I personally believe it's something that God calls us to do. So, definitely check that episode out. But today we're going to be kind of getting into the actual details, I think, a little bit. So, yeah. I guess, did you have anything?
No.
Oh,
not right now.
Oh, you like leaned up to the mic. I thought you were going to say something.
Put me on the spot.
Yeah. All right, going to Steven? No. Sorry, I thought you were about to say something. So I guess kind of getting into some real world information from just your experience so far. What do you think the value is of just everyday people knowing basic stuff like first responder / kind of bystander care? What do you think the value is?
It's a great question. The value is huge in a lot of those life-threatening injuries or medical situations that can happen. The value is huge. I can give a quick story. We recently in Brown Deer, Wisconsin, had a 2-year-old fall into an in-ground pool, unwitnessed. They assumed he was down in the water somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes. That's how long they had not seen him. Parents pulled him out and they started CPR. And then they called us immediately. And so we got there, we did our thing, we controlled the airway, we suctioned, we did our CPR, we did medical intervention, and we got ROSC, which is return of spontaneous circulation. And the kid came in 2 days later to visit the fire department and say thank you. And so we reiterate all the time the value of bystander CPR, just because you have a lot of oxygen in your body that's floating around, and you can pump that without even doing anything with the airway and move that oxygenated blood through the body, that by the time we get there, they're still in a position where they're viable candidates for resuscitation. So a lot of times if you just do nothing in the first 2 minutes, it becomes very, very, very low percentages chances of getting that person back. So we talk a lot about, that's a lot of the questions that docs ask us. Hey, was bystander CPR administered? That's actually one of the first things we say in our report when we give it over the radio is bystander CPR was done or not done. That was one of the first things they want to know, just because that changes some of the treatments that they do. So the value of bystanders participating in our medical care is huge. It's step one. And we talk a lot about what we call the golden hour, which is when the incident happens to when they get to surgical care or whatever they need, wherever their interventions are that they need, whether it's stroke, cardiac arrest, trauma, wherever their targeted goal is. We want to accomplish that within an hour. That's always our goal as EMS. So we figure out ways to get that done. And we can get that done a lot quicker when bystanders are part of it. So like if it were a car accident, if they are able to witness the situation, assist in the situation as simply as making the phone call, as simply as relaying the information as how fast the vehicle was going, how many people were in the vehicle, simple things, seatbelts being worn, airbags being deployed, things that we want to know. If they participate in that, that'll increase our decision making. That'll accelerate our decision making moving forward. So like whether knowing which hospitals we go to, it's a little different in Milwaukee area. We've got a lot of choices for hospitals. And so we are able to make our decisions a lot quicker when we have people there, or even a stroke, witnessing, making those calls and being able to tell us, when the last time they saw them well, normal, things like that. Those are things that bystanders have a great big value in. Even if they didn't even do hands-on, if they're able to be a witness and tell us what's going on and make that call to 911 as quick as possible, those are even simple things that I think a lot of people I've seen in the city where they'll just keep on going and not take that step to be that sort of servant. Get involved. Just because they don't want to get involved. And so that can happen too, where, we didn't call for 15 minutes. We didn't call for an hour. We didn't know what was going on, And so things do happen where unfortunately fatalities happen because people don't step in and make decisions. So I think where it's a little more rural where you live, the value of that bystander is even more valuable being up here where hospitals are further away.
Yeah.
Some weather has a larger impact. Road conditions have a larger impact. These medics have to make critical decisions in a very rapid pace based on just the environment you guys live in. And
right.
that bystander plays, I think, an even larger role than in an urban setting. Cause, we can, in our area, our goal is to be on scene from when the call was made within 6 minutes, whatever the emergency is. That's always our goal in my fire department. So we're typically there in less than 6 minutes.
Wow.
Where around here, that might not be the same.
Yeah, I think our average response time is 26 minutes
in
this state.
So that tells you a big difference. I mean, 26 minutes from that golden hour, that's a big chunk just in EMS having to get the equipment there. And even relaying the right information as a bystander might dictate what equipment arrives there on time. Yeah. So like if you give the appropriate information, remain calm, stay in that mindset and say, hey, this is what's going on, then the dispatcher will have the appropriate information to relay to whatever is supposed to be responding so we can get the appropriate
equipment. Yeah, they'll ask you all sorts of questions. When you call 911, it's like
they're pretty good at that.
It's a laundry list of things. Yep. And half of them it's like, I don't actually know that. I don't know that. Like age, things like that. Like sometimes you just don't know. So
exactly.
But just try to give as much information as possible because just like Josh was saying, like the littlest information could mean the most to someone who actually knows what they're doing. So,
So, I can say, bystanders have extreme amount of value. Big thing that the Milwaukee County is pushed on is compressions only. Just because the value of compressions are so high, and we've just seen that people are less willing to do CPR knowing that they have to do airway because they see it as, hey, that's gross. I got to put my mouth on that person's mouth. Yeah. Or, whether even if they carry a pocket mask in there, they're still less likely to do it than if they were to do compressions only. So the value of compressions are so high that we would rather just see people do compressions. So in the city, hands-only CPR is what's being taught, even in schools and everything. So even just pumping on somebody's chest and making a phone call is extremely valuable. So getting involved in small things like that is great. So whatever you can do to get education, a lot of schools, especially kids, a lot of schools are offering that sort of training in health classes. I don't know how it is around here, but in the Milwaukee area, elementary schools are teaching hands-only CPR right there. So you
it should be
pay for it.
I think it should be in every school. Like, I think it should easily
Absolutely.
be. It's something I harp on all the time. I'm like, why is it not a standard?
It should be like a requirement. Like, just like
before you graduate, you should have to learn CPR first aid.
Absolutely.
I think, but it's so easy. I mean, it's a 6 to 8 hour class or something like that. It's like, come on,
super fast, super easy.
Yeah.
Yep. And
but
easy to find.
Yeah. I think, I think a lot of people, I think there's a couple things that keep people from kind of taking that step and getting in there and responding. I think I think this has gone down a little bit, and I'm curious to know what you've seen, but a big one used to be people were scared of getting sued. And I think it still is for a lot of people, but it's important to understand that we have Good Samaritan laws in every state now. Some of them are not quite as not structured or written as well as I think they could be. They're a little bit vague, but generally, if you're trying to do something to help someone, it's going to be really hard for you to be civilly sued
100%.
Or held liable. But the other one, and this tends to be the biggest one in my opinion, is people are just intimidated by it. They're really scared. They don't know what to do. They're afraid that, they're going to end up getting stuck there, or they're just going to cause a problem, or, do
the wrong thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But like Josh just said, I think the value of just getting there and calling for help and starting that timer, that's something that Stephen and I talk a lot about in our classes. Like, you can be 1 minute away from the fire station. We hear it all the time when we do security consultations. It's like, oh, the fire station's 2 minutes down the road. Not a big deal. We're not worried about that. And it's like, no, it is a big deal, because they can be next door. And if they don't get told, if you don't start that timer, if you don't start that or initiate that process of making that 911 call and saying, here's where we're at, here's what happened, then they're never going to just show up. You guys aren't clairvoyant. You don't know what's going on and where to go exactly when something happens. So you need someone to initiate that process and start that timer.
100%.
So I think at a minimum, I was
about to say, we see that even in our trauma classes too, how long it takes, and they know they're going in, it's
a scenario.
In the scenario, they know they're about to respond to something medical, and it still will take a while to get the 911 call. It's like,
the amount of times I've had to be like,
is
anyone call
911
yet? I'm like, oh crap, and then they
happens all the time.
So, yeah. Do you think you've seen a trend upwards of more bystanders being involved, or do you think it's gone down in your time working?
So hands-only CPR pretty much was kind of getting started in the Milwaukee County when I was starting to work for North Shore. So we saw an influx of people getting, I can't remember the exact amount of years they started teaching hands-only CPR in schools and through education. But in the North Shore, we were really harping on it. We actually our safety bureau gets involved in going into schools and teaching these things. We have block parties in our city, and we'll teach hands-only CPR, talk about the values of it. And definitely seen an increase of since then of bystanders getting involved, just doing hands-only CPR. I think people are definitely more willing. I don't know if there's an increase across the nation or whatever, but as far as the hands-only CPR, I think that you'll see an increase. I don't know what the percentages are, but I definitely have seen it in my work, people getting involved. But people are still not, unfortunately. There's a good amount of people that do not do anything. Even in assisted living facilities where there's trained CNAs and stuff like that, sometimes they're not even getting involved.
No.
So, depending on the roles, there's still people not getting involved, which is unfortunate. So that talks about, it doesn't matter where you're at, who you are, who you're training, people don't get involved. So it's important too, for sure.
Is there anything you think that can be done? I know this is kind of a crazy question, but it sounds like hands-only CPR is such an easy thing to teach, and you don't have to really, I mean, what are the big things? Not breathing or no pulse, and then start CPR or start compressions. That's pretty straightforward. And if they're unconscious, you're probably gonna wake them up pretty quick if they're just sleeping or something.
If you start crushing on somebody's chest, they'll feel it. They'll feel it.
I've seen that. I actually it's one in Anchorage. I started compressions on a random super drunk lady that was like just literally laying, like it was wintertime too. She was just laying there. Like I was like, what in the world? And me and my buddy went up and I was like, hey, excuse me. Like I was patting on her and stuff, trying to get responsiveness.
Yeah.
And I was trying to feel for a pulse and like it was super like weak and thready, and she like wasn't breathing. That was the other thing. And I was like, dude, it's time to do CPR. And so I just like stanced up and did like one, and she was just like, oh, what's going on? And I was like, oh, sorry about that. Are you okay? She's like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
And we'd already called 911, so they showed up, and she was pissed that I called an ambulance. She was like, why did you do that? Like, I'm just trying to sleep. And they were like, well, you have frostbite. Like, because she had just literally been drunk,
just
passed
drunk
out in the
laying
snow.
out there.
Yeah,
for sure.
But
for sure, that sounds about right. Yeah.
No, it was it was pretty funny.
Very Anchorage.
So I talked to the guy, and I was EMT at the time, so I was kind of like laying him out or like telling him the stuff, and he was like, okay, cool. And she was like refusing transport and stuff, and I was like, I'm out of here. He's like, yeah, you can go. So I don't know. Anyways, so you'll figure it out. If they don't need CPR, you'll probably figure it out. And if you don't figure it out, then you're not hurting anything. It's not like you're going to kill them by doing compressions. So, where was I going with that? Oh, so what do you think can be done to better people's involvement or better create a culture of people getting involved to just respond, whether it's just showing up and calling 911 or actually jumping in and doing compressions or just helping, pulling people away from a burning vehicle? Like that's the kind of stuff that doesn't happen, and then people just die.
Yeah. I think it's exactly how you mentioned it before, in your earlier podcast. It's a mental mindset. Like I think that's what needs to be done is people need to realize like we're here for each other. We're a team in all this. Like you need to help people out whenever you can. I think that's the mindset that people need to have. It's hard to, I think in nature we're selfish and we have our own things that we deal with, and there can always be a reason why you shouldn't help. I got to be somewhere. I got work in 5 minutes. I don't have time for this. Whatever it is, there's always something that it's going to make it a sacrifice, whatever you do. You might get messy, you might get bloody, whatever. It's a sacrifice. So I think it's a mindset. That's a big one. And then obviously preparing yourself and whatever. You can't just not have any training and just like know what to do, it's for certain situations.
Some people think they can.
Yeah, some people think you can just be Joe Schmo and just roll in there and start,
they end up hurting
whatever.
The person worse.
Exactly. But so preparing yourself in these first responder trainings is always great. Even going to your local fire department, that can always be a simple thing. They're always willing to share what helps them. They're always willing. If somebody rolls in and says, hey, you know what, I don't have much going for training. I just want to know what to do in a situation where maybe somebody doesn't have a pulse or isn't breathing or whatever. What should I do? We'll give you the first responder AHA guidelines, whatever it is you're teaching in your area. We'll be willing to share it with you.
That's awesome.
So, if you want to go to your local fire department and ask them a few questions, that's always great. There's places and people like you guys who are willing to, do classes. You can come to these classes and get these type of trainings. Whatever you can do to prepare yourself to do that is always awesome. Preparing your family, that's always a good one. If maybe you have the training already, well, just develop everybody within that training. Yeah. Training kids. Kids are always willing. They're servants already. They're willing to help. They want to jump on it. And you get to a 12-year-old doing compressions is better than nobody doing compressions.
For sure.
So even that is super valuable. Or even a 12-year-old making a phone call like, hey, my dad's not talking to me, or whatever it is, whatever the situation is,
Yeah.
So,
and that goes back to that story with like David, and his buddy, when they unburied that guy in the avalanche. I mean, he was only 16 years old at the time, but he happened to be, him and his buddy were the only ones who have gone through a CPR first aid class.
Yeah.
At 16 years old, out of all the adults that were on the mountain. So they started doing compressions on the guy once they dug him out. And it's like, they're the kids in the situation, but they were the ones that were willing and able to do it. So
exactly. So
you're never too young to, I guess, get prepared for things like that. I guess it's what that kind of comes down to.
100%. So, and I think that's what we've found as medical in general is like, hey, let's get people the training right away. Let's do it in elementary school. Let's do it in middle school. Let's do it in high school. A lot of schools are, paying for kids to go take their EMT course their senior year to set them up, especially people who are interested in some sort of medical field, nursing, EMS, whatever. A lot of times we're seeing high schoolers come into EMT classes and get certified as an EMT. So there's a lot of different ways you can prepare yourself. But I think the biggest one is just the willingness to jump on board.
Yeah, and I think the people who are going out of their way to get prepared, have already made that step into being willing. Like that, their mind's already gone into that, that kind of helper mode where obviously they feel, okay, I need to do this so I can help others.
Right.
You're not benefiting anything. Well, I mean, maybe you are benefiting for yourself as well because there's always self-aid, but yeah.
Self-aid's kind of hard with compressions, but...
with compressions. I'm not talking about CPR. I'm talking about bleeding or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even our dispatchers are trained to walk people through. We have separate dispatchers are designed to walk people through CPR. So even a non-trained CPR member who's on scene, bystander, is there, and they call and they're like, oh, he's not breathing. Well, does he have a pulse? No, I don't know. I don't think he has a pulse. Well, did you check if he's awake? They'll ask all those questions, and then the dispatcher decides, this is cardiac arrest based off of what this bystander is telling me. Mm-hmm. They'll ask them, are you willing to do compressions? That's the decision right there. You already decided to make the phone call. Maybe you don't have training, and they're like, now you got to be willing to do the CPR. And then what they'll do is like, okay, I'm going to send you over to a different dispatcher. He's going to walk you through CPR. And so then they'll walk them through CPR.
Talk about cool, but talk about a bad way to learn. Bad way to learn CPR for the first time.
That's an example of willingness right there. Like, we have that happen a lot of the times, and we'll get the information over our dispatch, because obviously the dispatcher is sending us off on our way at the time, and they'll relay that information. This call was called, and bystander was not willing to do CPR. So then we know, okay, no CPR is being done. We need to, get the ball on the roll, because we know nothing's happened yet. So would that happen? I've had that report over the radio a lot of times, like bystander's not willing to do CPR. Bystander's not willing to do CPR. So it does happen.
Man, that is crazy.
So, or they'll say, bystander CPR has been initiated. So
sweet.
So that, depending on the situation, that definitely is what we hear on the. So
yeah, and then also, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it before where guys see you guys get on scene and they just stop doing CPR because they're like, oh, help's here.
I don't let that happen.
I was about to say, yeah. Well, I know, but we always tell people just because help's here doesn't mean you stop. You got to keep rolling.
Yeah, that's good. That's such a good thing to train for sure.
Yeah, don't stop. Once you've started, don't
stop. And sometimes they just put you to work.
Relieved.
Like the time I did CPR, they were just like, you guys are doing good.
Keep at it.
You guys going to keep just rolling? We'll work around you. And we're just like, yeah, sure. Why not? We don't care.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I've done a bunch of times is I ask them if they're good, and I tell them to keep on going until we're set up, because there's a lot we got to do right when we get there. So if we could take an extra set of hands, we'll take it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, something you brought up, Stephen, that I wanted to touch on. You were talking about how people that are pursuing classes and furthering their education in that stuff, might already have that kind of mentality or that mindset. And I agree with that. I would say, though, that I think that it can develop that mindset, going and learning simple things.
Oh, I think so, too.
So I would encourage you, if you're unsure about this, it makes you uncomfortable, I would encourage you to go take a class. I think going and taking it, getting past that fear of the unknown, because that's really what it is, kind of uncertainty, fear of the unknown, that's promoted by ignorance. And you going and dismantling that ignorance with quality training and education is going to put you in a way different position mentally.
Yeah, that was we had a student that took our trauma class, and he said, at first it was incredibly intimidating. He was like, man, I was like, the first day, because it's a 2-day, 16-hour course, which honestly isn't even long enough, but it's as much information we can pack in as we possibly can in a 2-day course. But he was like, man, I was super intimidated the first day, but the second day when it came around, I was so much less intimidated because I started to understand how to actually fix the problem.
That's cool.
He said, which made it like he could like actually sit there and listen to it all, because he's like, okay, I understand how to fix the problem now. Where before I was just looking at these injuries like, I don't even know how I'd begin with that.
Right.
So it's like that takes the intimidation down by actually having an understanding, just like what you said.
Well, I mean, I can relate that to, like, I think back to my schooling. We start CPR. Like, if you have nothing and you wanted to become a paramedic, you start CPR, you do your EMT, then you do your paramedic. And I felt like the EMT part of and the CPR stuff was way more intimidating and almost felt harder than all my paramedic training, which is a lot more challenging information. But I felt like it was just more understandable because I already had a base in EMS. Because, like, if you think about it, before I started the CPR and the EMT, I didn't have any EMS background behind that. For me, at the time I was starting, it's like I had no idea.
Okay, yeah, I see what
being
you're saying.
on an ambulance. I didn't know, CPR. I didn't know those simple things, which is the foundation to paramedic. Is all those small things. It felt like I was drinking from a fire hose,
right,
for the first part. And then when I got to paramedic, I was like, well, this is all the same stuff except advanced. So it was just an advanced version of EMT and CPR and all that stuff. So I can understand why it'd be super intimidating coming in and be like, especially if you don't even really feel like you want to, it can be really, really intimidating.
Yeah,
so I can understand that, but like.
And for that class, it was almost kind of a forced thing, because we actually went out to a organization that's very remote that they were just basically like, we need something out here because we're not getting help for, they were thinking the average response time was like, 4 hours or something ridiculous for them before they could actually get help.
Yeah,
and that's like on a good day.
Oh,
like,
man.
that's like good skies.
That's
like
good
you're getting,
weather. Yeah.
It was like 2 hours and 46 minutes.
Okay,
was
so
their
little,
estimated response time.
But that's still a long time.
But if they could fly, that was the thing,
Yeah, then the number jumps.
It goes to
mass.
days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were like, basically like, well, we just need to have something where at least we can, like, they had a paramedic, right, on scene at all times out there.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But I mean, but they just wanted even the individual staff that.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, if you have one paramedic and you have a serious injury or illness or whatever it is,
and what if it's that person?
That's
exactly
too.
Like that was kind of how the military looked at it. And you brought up, even if you're not interested in getting the training, that was absolutely my experience. Like, I was an infantryman, but they were like, Barlow, you seem like you're going to be able to pick up. The Army's kind of funny. They'll pick like, who's not going to fail at the book work, They'll be like, Barlow, you seem like you're relatively decently smart. So we're going to, you're still dumb, but you're smarter than some of these other guys. So basically,
you're the smartest grunt I've ever seen.
Yeah. So I was just a dumb grunt, but then you have your 68 Whiskey, who's a combat medic. Who, is basically
those guys are pretty
military equivalent of a paramedic.
For
they
sure.
do a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
But my unit had a secondary medic position, which was like, if that guy is the guy that gets hurt, or if he needs help, that's mainly what it was, is someone that can assist him and care.
Yeah.
So they picked me. They voluntold me. They were like, you're doing it. And I was like, oh, okay. And so they sent me to, the advanced CLS stuff. So ACLS, and then to EMT, EMT A and B. So that was not something that I wanted to do. Like, it wasn't like, I think I want to do this. But then doing that, I actually learned to love it. And then I was like, I love the medical stuff. It's actually really cool.
It's awesome.
And sometimes I wish I pursued it, but this, got at other plans, and this business has been fun. So obviously did nursing stuff for a little bit in college. That was my plan. But then this, like I said, the business kind of took off. But in the military, got those EMT certifications, and the amount of, like you said, it was like drinking from a fire hose. And I 100% agree, especially when you get into like the medications and stuff like that. It's just like, what, like activated charcoal. It's just like all this crazy stuff that they're just like, you can do this, but then you can't do any of this, and I don't know. It was so many things and it's already changed so much. Like I did it I think I did it back in
It had to have been like 2011.
Yeah. So it's been expired. I think it lasted 5 years. So it's been expired for a long time. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy when you come out on the other side of that, though, how much more confident you are in just really simple things.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you have to go take EMT, but looking back at like EMT and then kind of through that lens, and you probably have this even more so as a paramedic, but looking through that lens at then seeing like, man, all that simple first aid CPR stuff is so important. Like, and it's so easy. It's so easy to learn, you know. Like I said, you know, usually it's an 8-hour day.
Yep.
And you get certified. And as long as you take it seriously and stay up to date on it, I think you're a valuable member of society. I think you're ready to help.
Yeah, and try to
100%.
vet your instructors, because I mean, I'm sure everyone that's listening that's taken their first aid CPR have had, you know, not so great teachers, and then you've had really good teachers that actually know their stuff. So definitely take it from people that, you know, have a good reputation, I would say, because it's going to be a whole lot more palatable if you actually are learning from an instructor that knows what they're talking about. And, you know, carries the room like an instructor should.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and we'll get into training a little bit later. I want to come back to the training side of things because I think it's huge.
Yeah.
But getting back into some more real world stuff, what are some common mechanisms of injury or just common injuries you see out there that people should kind of be aware of?
Like more trauma? Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, honestly, anything like, you know, at someone that's trying to be prepared in like everyday life.
Yeah.
You know, living in America, since we're in America, or, you know, any kind of modern society, you know, what are things that you could expect to see in your everyday life and things you should kind of be prepared for?
Sure. Car accidents, I think, is one of our common mechanism injuries that we see in there. And I think that's where we get a lot of bystander help is car accidents. I think that's 100% the most common source of trauma that we see in our field is car accidents, especially in our area. Milwaukee's a pretty relatively dense populated area of the county, and there's a lot of crazy drivers in the area. So we see a lot of car accidents. Honestly, our most we really don't do a crazy amount of trauma. Trauma's kind of a little bit lower on the list. A lot of times cars are built so well these days that even car accidents don't relate to or doesn't result in any sort of trauma. A lot of times they're walking out just fine, even flipping a vehicle. So
that's awesome.
We really don't see as much trauma as we used to with car accidents, but we're still seeing it, obviously. More medical stuff is definitely more common. The life expectancy has gone up. There's a lot more nursing homes. There's a lot more older people especially in a more populated area, but there's just a higher age. So you're seeing a lot more medical issues than you are seeing diabetic issues. You're seeing strokes. You're seeing heart problems. You're seeing breathing problems, whether it's, COPD, CHF, whatever it is, respiratory issues, illnesses. I mean, especially with when COVID came in, and you have, that there's just a lot of medical issues more commonly than there is trauma related stuff, but there still is trauma, and that's where we see a lot of value in bystanders getting involved and telling us what was going on, witnesses especially. But you're seeing a lot of medical,
and even with the medical, there's still methods to be prepared for that.
100%.
Diabetic episodes, things like that. Having sugar even or something just so you can give to them. I mean, you don't have to be anything crazy, but
it can be as simply as positioning, when somebody's either having a diabetic seizure, stroke, things like that. Obviously, neurologically, things aren't working appropriately. They're having some sort of blockage where their body is not able to tell them what to do. So it can be as simple as body position to help them breathe appropriately, because you're involuntarily, you will have some sort of breathing that will kick in, but you won't have the ability to position your body appropriately. So even just simple things like with a seizure, pushing them to their side and allowing them to breathe so they're not choking on their secretions, things like that. I mean,
so you're thinking like recovery position for most of those?
100%. Yeah, exactly. I mean, depending on how bad the diabetic episode is too, it can be just keeping them safe, because they still might be able to sit and stand and move around, but there can be times where they're so bad that, they can't. Seizures, strokes can be another one where you really need to help with positionings, because depending on how bad the stroke is, they might need help in recovery position, things like that. So, medically, there's always room for bystanders to get involved and just make, like, I mean, I'll reiterate this all the time, making that call. It's huge. So,
do you think things like stroke and seizure, you mentioned that, like diabetic seizures and stuff like that, is that something that, how do I word this? Are there little things you could be able to identify as like an everyday person that could maybe give you the kind of cues to go ahead and call 911?
Great question. So for strokes, obviously unequal strength, that's always a big one. Facial droop is an obvious one. Not acting themselves or acting, abnormal, not alert and oriented to a normal, like, maybe however long ago last time you saw them, they were, they knew who they were, where they are, what's going on. Now they're not being able to either talk, or they're slurring their speech, or, they can't look at you for some odd reason. They're gazing to one side. They can't do the things that they normally can do. Those are things that, like, okay, this is a stroke. Those are things that we always look for. We use what's called a BFAS assessment. It's kind of like the Cincinnati scale. Similar differences. We're always checking for balance, eye gaze, facial droop. We're looking for all those things. Equal grip strength, being able to walk, things like that. Sensation. So those are simple things that you can do. Finding a simple assessment is always helpful. So whether it's the Cincinnati scale, BFAS scale, whatever it is, being able to just simply assess a patient can be very, very, very helpful in making, like, okay, maybe this is a stroke. They don't have any strength on the left side. They're kind of drooping, easy ways to check.
Would you say err on the side of caution with that stuff? If you notice any of those things, just call 911.
Yeah. We're always willing to come over, check it out, and make the decision ourselves. So if you think it's a stroke, it's a stroke. That's what I would say. You're like, oh, maybe this is a stroke. Could be, if somebody's altered, obviously that's not normal. So if somebody is altered, that's typically what tips off a stroke, is they're altered. Mm-hmm. Whether it's, altered because they can't get up, or altered because they're not talking to you normally. If they're altered, you can be like, oh, that's probably a stroke. We'll come check it out. We'll assess them. We'll do vitals. We'll do everything, and we'll get the ball rolling. So yeah, err on the side of caution on anything life-threatening. Chest pain, err on the side of caution. Think it's a stroke. Arrest, altered, err on the side of caution. Difficulty breathing, err on the side of caution. Those are the three big ones: is chest pain, difficulty breathing, altered mental status. Those are the things that I would say err on the side of caution.
Because that could be a whole variety of things.
100%. Yep.
But it doesn't really matter what it is. It just matters that they get help right now.
Absolutely.
As far as, it matters what it is, obviously, but as far as from a bystander perspective.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. As far as I don't know what's going on. I'm not medically trained. They're altered. 911. I don't know what's going on. He's complaining about his chest hurting. 911. I don't know what's going on. He looks like he can't breathe. 911. Simple. So, yeah.
Sweet.
That's what I would say for sure. I'd say in our area, medical is just massive in comparison to everything else.
Well, that's something we talk about all the time is, if you listen to this podcast, odds are you probably shoot guns and stuff like that, or maybe even carry a gun every day. And we reiterate this to our audience, but if you do those things and you don't train medical, then you're messing up, because your odds of running into a medical situation or whether it's an emergency or, whatever, are a lot higher than ever using that gun. It's fun to do the gun stuff, but I think a massive part of the whole kind of Minuteman mentality is, you're ready at a moment's notice, and a massive part of that, it's one of our core kind of pieces of our company. It is response, and that's referring to medical response, and that's something that it's on you. Ultimately it's on you. Yeah. If someone needs your help, and you're all that's there, or you're the first one there, then it's on you, and you got to be able to do it.
Yep.
And I think paying attention to these things are super important.
Yeah.
So
think about the percentage of our call volume in the Milwaukee area. It's 75 to 80% medical, 20% fire, So like you could think about it in the same scenario. I bet you it's very similar to cops. You know, they're going to go up on a call and they're not always shooting people.
No.
A lot of times it's medical stuff they're going on to. We see them on a lot of medical stuff.
Yeah.
And they're our first responders a lot of the times. Is they're the first people there because they're already on the road. They're ready to go. So medical situations, they're one of the first people there as well. So if you think about it there, if you really want to get involved, you're concealed carry, you want to be a part of the community in that way, you might as well get side because you have a greater chance of being a big part of the community in the medical side because there's just a greater chance that it's going to happen. So I would say if you're one of those people that, you carry guns, you want to be a big part of the community by, concealed carry, stuff like that, might as well do the medical side too. Jump on board because, it's a greater chance it's going to happen where you get to get those hands dirty and do something cool for your community. Yeah. So
I think they're two sides of the same coin.
Oh, 100%.
I would
agree.
It's like if you have that kind of protector mentality, then, that just dovetails right into, medical response.
Love it. Yeah.
And a lot of it's so simple. And again, we're kind of beating a dead horse as far as that goes, but it's like, we just see it so much. Steven and I see it in our class, like the light bulb comes on and it's like, oh, that I get it. And it's like, boom. And people just start flowing, and it's like, it's awesome to see,
Yep.
You got a massive hemorrhage and it's like, direct pressure, tourniquet, it's just simple stuff that you do. It's simple intervention.
It is.
And, no pulse, not breathing, CPR, start doing compressions.
Yep. A lot of times
someone's choking on their spit, roll them into recovery position. It's that stuff is so simple and they need more help. They absolutely need more help, but you are that bridge to get them to professional care.
Yeah. And then going back to like city versus rural as well. I know you were talking about car accidents, car accidents are going to be more, percentage wise, they're going to be more car accidents in a city, places that are packed.
Yeah.
Where places that are more rural, not as high, but then you got weather as a consideration. How many people like on the way from where we live to Anchorage get in car accidents through the pass. There's lack of cell phone service and not nearly as many people driving by. Mm-hmm. So being willing to actually like get the ball rolling as far as like getting help on the way is even more important if you're in those areas because you have that many less people driving past that accident, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So like we're in a city, you have a higher percentage of getting help coming faster because you have so many people driving by. Yeah, there might be a lot of people that just keep driving, like a lot.
Yep.
But at least there's like someone that's going to be like, okay, I'm going to hop on the phone and be like, I bet no one's called. Or you got like multiple people calling, which isn't a problem.
Right.
It's like,
that's more often than nobody calling is, we get multiple calls about the same thing, which is great. But that shows you the value of making that call right away because it could be, you don't know how long that car's been there. Yeah. Sitting on the side of the ditch. It could have been 20 minutes ago, especially, like you said, just less people around. Could have been there for a while. You never know. You got to make that call quick. So
I guess on that, it's a good chance to kind of segue into this. So once you make that call, what happens? Do you want to explain like what the whole process is? You kind of got into it a little bit with dispatch, but do you want to break down, you make a call, that timer gets initiated.
Yep.
What happens next?
Make that call, timer starts, dispatch will determine what the emergency is, and they'll dispatch the appropriate units. And at least in the Milwaukee, they'll dispatch what they deem is appropriate. So we separate, like if we were just to take medical, we separate our calls into ALS, BLS, advanced life support, and basic life support. So depending on the injury, things like chest pain, difficulty breathing, altered mental status, immediately ALS calls. And so in the North Shore, it's different in every department, but we send, like on an ALS call, we'll send a heavy piece, being an engine or a truck, and then we'll send a medical unit is what we send. And we just send the heavy piece so we have extra set of hands just because we want to move quick. If it's something serious, we've got enough hands to make things move efficiently. On a BLS call, we just send an ambulance just because mechanism of whatever's happening, we only need the transport unit on those calls. So that being said, dispatch makes the decision, they send the appropriate units, and then we respond depending on what we need to. So like on a fire, we've got our benchmark is 1 minute and 30 seconds. We want to be out of the barn. So our goal is to be on the road, rolling in 1 minute and 30 seconds. So calls made, timer starts, minute 30, we're now rolling. 6-minute response time starts from when the call comes out. So however long it takes to get us there, 4 minutes, whatever. we should be on scene within 6 minutes of when the call was made or when dispatched us is our goal. And so then we get on scene and we make our assessment of what we need. So we'll make our determination based on whether the bystander says, hey, guy's having a hard time breathing. We'll go and, assess and do whatever interventions we need to do. So in the North Shore, kind of our time frame, what it looks like, it's all done within 6 minutes. But the sooner you make that call, the sooner we can go. So, and we're not always in the barn. So sometimes it takes us longer. Like, we're a big department that likes to train and likes to stay ready for whatever it is. So sometimes we're training. So sometimes we're responding from a different area than where our department is. So the sooner you make the call, the quicker we can go. So, and sometimes units aren't available. So we have 5 stations that cover 7 cities. Maybe we're on another medical call in our first due area, being like, we're in Brown Deer. All the Brown Deer units are out. Well, now our units are coming from Glendale, which is an additional 2 or 3 minute drive. So things like that can elongate response time. So sometimes, our goal is always less than 6 minutes, but depending on what's going on in the city, it can be much, much longer.
Right.
Depending on, and weather plays a role. We deal with snow just as much as not just as much, but just like you guys do. So, so that's kind of what our system looks like. And then there's obviously fire. So that's a whole nother category, and that gets a whole nother different response. So
then you respond on scene to whatever's going on.
Yep.
What happens when you guys get on scene? Like, what are you wanting to see? Well, I guess you can talk about, I'd like to know the whole process as far as on scene, if you transport them, all that, but then also, what do you like to see from bystanders when you get there? Like, do you want as much information as you can get? Do you want them to shut up and go away? Like, what, what are the things that you want to see? That's a great
question. We like to divide and conquer. So I think when bystanders come most helpful is obviously in our ALS calls. So anytime of advanced life support call is out. So chest pain, difficulty breathing, altered mental status. Those are your classic 3 ALS calls. That's when I think they're most valuable bystanders, because a lot of times we got a lot of get a lot done. So chest pains, like if someone's potentially having a heart attack and maybe they're not in cardiac arrest yet, having some sort of heart attack, time is extremely valuable, because obviously they're having some sort of myocardial infarction, meaning heart cell death in the heart, that can lead to cardiac arrests. So our goal is to prevent that from happening and getting them to an area where they can prevent that from happening. So cath lab, that's where they would need to go. So there's a lot that we have to do, a lot of vitals, a lot of things that we have to do to get before we determine whether that's even even a heart attack or not. So 12 lead, that's a big one. So we're going to take a picture of the heart. That's a big one that we need to get done quickly. And our goal is to get that within the first minute. So we got a lot of questions that we have to ask. So a lot of times we divide. We'll have medics working with the patient, and then we'll have a different guy kind of gathering information. Like medical history, that's a big one. So if you don't know the person, like, hey, this guy just has chest pain, or just sitting on the side of the road, you can ask him like, oh, do you have any heart problems? Simple things like that. Or how old are you? Things like that. Those are information that we need. Age, history.
Are you on any medications?
Medications, things like that. The simple questions that you can ask. Sometimes you'll still be on the phone, at least in the Milwaukee area, with the dispatcher. They'll kind of help prompt you through some of those questions, keep you calm, things like that. But simple things is telling us what you saw. It can be as simple as that. Like, dude, he looked like really sick. He was keeled over. He was having a really hard time breathing, or he might have been different before we got there. So like he was altered. He wasn't responding to me. Things like that are very helpful information that we can use.
It sounds pretty close to how they do it here. They seem like they divide up, because every time we've gotten EMS on scene out there at the prison, it's been very much the same. You got one guy that comes in, he kind of got a notepad, and he's talking to, people that are like the first responders and stuff, kind of getting information, or the nurse, if the nurse is there. And then you got like 2 or 3 other guys like actually working on the patient. So
it's exactly how we do it. And I think that's a good way to go. And sometimes getting in those guys' way, that can be less helpful. when you're getting especially the guys that are asking the patient questions. So staying calm. I think a lot of people can get really flustered in there. And if you just need to take a second, take a breath, great. Then you can tell us what's going on. I think a lot of people get in our way when they're just really excited, they're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of training in helping people through, especially bystanders, helping them through giving us information. So those are definitely ways you can help us out is age, medical history, medications, things like that. Especially if you're family. I think most of the time it's family.
Yeah.
Or close friends that, something's happened, because that's usually who you're with when a medical event happens with you and you make the phone call. So a lot of times you do already know who they are.
Usually dispatch is pretty good about getting that information prior.
For sure.
If they can.
Yeah.
Most of the times I've had to do it, it's always been out there, so I don't know all the information off the top of my head. I'm like, I don't even know which guy this guy is. I just know, he just came in.
Yep. So dispatchers are pretty good. Yeah. Dispatchers are pretty good about that. So those are a few small things. It's like we being a dead horse, but yeah, it's little things that make big differences. Just being able to be willing to get that small amount of information, and we kind of lay it out for you a lot of the times. Dispatchers prompt it, we ask for it, things like that. I think it's just being willing. Willing. So, but otherwise, as the call goes on, we'll see based on what we find with how the patient presents, and we'll make the decision on where they need to go. So if someone's having an actual heart attack, there's only a handful of hospitals in the Milwaukee area that can handle a hospital or handle a myocardial infarction. So there's only a few places that have a cath lab. So we got to make that decision quick, because sometimes they're far away. So we might have a hospital within a certain amount of time, but the appropriate hospital might be further away.
Oh, okay.
And we also deal with traffic. So depending on the time of day, might increase that time significantly. A hospital could be 15 minutes away, and then during rush hour it can be 35 minutes away.
Dang.
So it's that's the next decision we have to make, and we obviously want to make that one pretty quick. And then we have to prepare the hospital. So if it is something serious that we have to prepare them for, strokes, STEMIs being heart attacks, cardiac arrests, traumas, those are things that we have to prepare hospitals for so that they can be ready. So it's all one step into the system. It's like bystanders prepare us, we prepare the hospital prepares the surgeons. So it's all a step, and not every hospital, I don't know how it is around here, but not every hospital has surgeons right away. So there's different categories of hospitals. So for example, for trauma, there's trauma 1, trauma 2. Trauma 1 has 24-hour available surgeons on scene. Trauma 2 has them within 30 minutes away. And then the next level is, I think, within an hour or something like that. I can't remember all the divides, but that also helps us. That's when we make our decision is, hey, there's going to be a surgeon right there ready to go. And that hospital might be further away, but that might be faster because they have the surgeon right there.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think that's how ours does it. I think we have on-call surgeons.
Yeah, well,
sure.
It just recently got upgraded, I think.
Oh, awesome. Anchorage?
No, so Anchorage has always been, Providence has been trauma 1.
Okay, that's what I figured.
Up in Anchorage, but the one down here, Central Peninsula Hospital was not, it's not trauma 1. I think it's trauma 2 now.
Okay.
I think they just bumped it up to trauma 2, but it was pretty low for a long time.
Okay.
But they got new facilities and more staff and stuff like that now, which is cool. But I know that they still do a lot of medevac stuff. They'll send people up to Anchorage pretty often.
It's our only hospital, so it's kind of like, you're going there.
Yeah.
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 But I mean,
at least you're going to start your hospital time there, and then you might get flown out to Anchorage eventually. But
I mean, once you got a patient on board, though, you guys have a lot of equipment at your disposal to keep them rocking and rolling for a while, I would guess.
Yeah, we pretty much are mobile nurses for the most part. There's some medications we obviously can't give, but there's a lot that we do that the ER also does the same. We're pretty much a mobile ER for the most part. So once you get in the back of a med unit, there's a lot that we provide, a lot of medications, a lot of interventions that we provide right then and there. So the next decision we make is whether we want to stay and play or load and go is kind of another big thing is like, hey, let's just hurry this up and get this in the ambulance, get this going towards the hospital, or we got to stay here and play and start treating the patient while they're here. So there's a couple times we'll stabilize the patient on scene and then decide to go to the ambulance and decide to go to the hospital. Or there's times where we're like, no time to stabilize, let's get them in the ambulance, stabilize them in there, and get them to the hospital right away, just because time can play a huge factor. So there's a handful of decisions that we make that will change how the call runs for sure. So
sweet.
Is it like a group effort decision, or is it like you got leads depending on which call out?
That's a good question. We have what we call the PTL, paramedic team leader. He's the guy that's kind of in charge of the call, but we have so many paramedics in our department that in the culture of our calls are very team oriented. Like we're often just chirping around the whole time, talking like, hey, I see this, I see this, I see this. And we come to a decision together. And then sometimes like we may not agree on something. And then that's when the PTL's decision is kind of like the last word. It's like, okay, we're going to go with this. And we're like, okay, sounds good. And then we just go down that route. So we are more often than not on the same page, especially with very critical calls. We're a lot of times right on the same page. It's usually awesome. Those ones that are kind of like,
can go either way.
Yeah, it could go either way. It's not life threatening, but it's like, hey, this is critical or not, just kind of on that fence of let's make that decision as a team. So we usually err on the side. Obviously, most of the time we'll err on the side of caution. So almost always.
Yeah, that's legit.
Yeah. So
cool. So yeah, I mean, we kind of getting back into education. I mean, we already kind of talked about this. I guess I think it goes without saying, you think it's pretty important for everyday people to get first aid CPR. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on AED, like understanding AEDs and implementing that, using that?
Very valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think having that on board it tells us a lot of information, because that AED has the ability to interpret rhythms to a certain point. And if you put that on and use it, we know whether or not they're in a critical rhythm or not, because of whether it decided, hey, I need a shock, I don't need a shock as an AED. So training on AEDs is, I think, super valuable. It's super basic. I think if you're going to get CPR trained, you might as well just figure out that AED, because it's 2 stickers and it tells you what to do.
Yeah.
And it almost keeps you on a rhythm. I think CPR is a lot easier with an AED than it is without,
because there's a metronome.
Yeah. It's your timer. It keeps you on rhythm. It helps you. It kind of gets you just in a flow. And I would say if you're going to do some CPR, just figure out how to use that AED. It's a very helpful tool.
I think most classes are clustered now.
Yeah.
Usually, I know the class we're certified to teach, it's AED first aid or CPR first aid AED, so it's all, you get it all together.
That's how AHA is too as well.
Okay.
But we do some hands-only CPR training, and that's literally just pump the chest.
Yeah.
To make it easy and simple for people, and hopefully increase the chance of people helping.
That's just like information. That's
more
you don't
information.
Get like a card.
Yeah, you don't get certified in anything. That's just, hey guys, get down there, start pumping on the chest.
Dude, we should look into that. We should go talk. Honestly, I like that. It's just super simple. Here's when you do it. Here's what you do. Do it as fast as you can. As soon as you've determined that you need to do it.
It's very easy.
I wonder if that's, maybe even looking into seminars or something and just doing that. I think that could be pretty cool.
You should see
what
you're
talking to local. I about said law enforcement, maybe them too, but firefighters.
Yeah, you should see what your departments are doing. You should see what schools are doing. A lot of schools, at least in our area, are teaching it. So
okay,
those are definitely places I would start and ask. Say, hey, you guys doing hands-only CPR? Oh no, or oh yeah, we are. I think it's a very helpful thing.
It's surprising that teachers aren't required to be first aid CPR.
That is crazy to me.
Weird. Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of schools have nurses and stuff like that.
That's true.
I mean, something happens in the classroom right here, right now. It's like, if you have a little bit of information, you could, that could make the difference. So, what are your thoughts on continued education? So beyond first aid CPR, I mean, obviously not for everyone, but are there any things you can go do like, is getting BLS, basic life support, really get you much over first aid CPR, or is that really only valuable if you want to go into the medical field?
At least in our area, it definitely holds its value, because anytime you advance yourself in any sort of category, you're just going to be better at the basic stuff then.
Yeah.
So you'll be better at CPR because you'll be confident about some of those more advanced skills that you know the value of that. I think the difference in value from knowing nothing to CPR is much greater than knowing CPR to going to BLS, just because there's so much you could do just with CPR.
Yeah.
That, like, I think just the value of that alone is just so huge that if you were like kind of on the fence, like you just want to, maybe if you're thinking maybe you want to just know it because you want to know it, great. But I just think the CPR thing is just so valuable, that the difference when you jump up to the BLS is a little bit more less, but a little less valuable than the CPR, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But I still think it's extremely invaluable, because that jumps into a lot of airway stuff, and
right,
that's just going to increase your percentages of helping that person out. If you know some of those other things with airway management, airway control, things like that, those are the things that CPR, I think, does they just touch the surface of.
Yeah, it's like head tilt chin lift.
Yeah, exactly. Head tilt chin lift. Sometimes they'll talk about a couple breaths, but then you get into BLS, they talk about the way to hold a BVM appropriately. Yep. They talk about some advanced airway managements, NPA, OPA, things like that. Or actually, I don't know if it does OPA.
I think you do get into OPA and BLS.
Yeah, I can't remember where the cutoff is, but either way,
BLS is kind of like you have to be BLS to OPA.
And then obviously when you jump into some of that, you start learning some anatomy. And so then you start to learn what you're doing and why it's valuable. And so then I think you get this sense of urgency because you know what you're doing, because you know the body a little bit more.
You understand what's going on.
You understand what's going on.
Yeah.
So you can vouch for this as an EMT, is like, once you learn some of that stuff, I think it gave you a more sense of, you could probably say that. It gives you a sense of urgency, because the blood's moving like this, and the airway, when I move it, makes this much of a difference.
Yeah.
And when I give BVMs, things like that, and gearing breaths, ventilations, things like that, you're making such a big difference, and you know how it feels. You've done the training, and then anytime you do training in more advanced stuff, the basic stuff just feels easy. So I think if you have that protector mindset, if you've got that idea, that I say might as well do it, because then you're just going to feel way more confident. I think it goes with anything. I think if you are carrying a weapon, if you think about it that way, if you get more advanced training with that weapon, you're shooting more often, you're doing some more challenging techniques, the easier techniques just feel like nothing. Mm-hmm. Same thing applies to medical side of things. You do some of those more advanced techniques, when you step back a notch, it's like, oh, this is nothing. You have no worries about doing CPR. You're like, oh, it's just CPR, because I put an eye gel in the other day. CPR is nothing. Or put a hole in somebody's chest to help them breathe. Put a needle D. This just feels like it's just CPR. So I'd say it holds its value for sure. Holds its value.
Yeah, I think the anatomy thing is actually super important. I think it kind of depends on the type of learner you are, but I feel like me, I don't have as much of a background in it, but I've just kind of forced my way into it more than anything. Like, I haven't gotten, I didn't get forced into by the military, or I wasn't looking for a career path or anything like that, so, but I was just kind of like, oh, this sounds fun to learn. Why not? Let's do it.
Yeah.
But I think me understanding the anatomy, I remember when I started looking at your, the negative and positive pressures for your lungs and stuff like that, how that actually affects you for tension pneumothorax and things like that. When I found out that you have that your lungs are under negative pressure, I was like, oh, the light bulb.
That explains it.
I was like, that makes so much more sense now. It's I was always like, how is there air pressure getting built up in there? It was just doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's maybe just the way my mind works. So I'm the same way with working on cars and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. If I'm just aimlessly doing something and I don't really know why it's doing it, it's harder for me to retain that information.
Sure.
Where if I actually understand why your body works this way, I can retain how to actually fix the situation, because I'm like, okay, yeah, you're going to have this issue. So it's like problem solving more.
Yes, 100%.
Versus just like, we do 30 compressions.
Yep.
It's just because that's why.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Having that why behind everything, I think is so, that's what, I think it's actually on one of our, it's like a little thing that we have on our slide. It's
understand the why enables the how or something like that.
There you go. Steven knows it. Yeah. You think I would, since I present it all the time, but I always forget what those are. But, it's the same thing for me. Like you brought up, like the plural, negative pressure in the pleural space and stuff like that. But the thing that always cracks me up is once you realize that a lung is not like a balloon. So many people think it's like, oh yeah, it's like a, if you get
someone pushed a bunch
punctured
of
lung, it's like it's a balloon popped, and like no, not at all. It's an organ. It's not at all like a bag filled with air. You know, so little things like that. Once you understand it, it's like, man,
because you're not like cracking open human bodies every day.
Yeah, exactly.
No one's getting the chances to work on cadavers unless they're actually doing it for like. Well, I mean, there's schools you can go do that with, but you got to pay some money. And
I think for the majority of people, though, you learned about biology and anatomy in school, in high school, and then that's the last you touched it.
Yeah, but I was an idiot and I didn't listen. So.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was leading up to. You didn't pay attention. You don't remember the difference between veins and arteries.
Just looking over at me with so much disappointment.
So it's good to go get. It's good to go learn.
Just kidding. Yeah, for sure.
So getting a little bit into some gear, some medical gear and supplies. You talked about it earlier, people not wanting to get involved and stuff, and then, making that decision. Something I wanted to know, I guess, as we get into gear, because this falls right in line with that. How important do you think PPE is? So like having gloves and stuff like that. Worry about it or not really?
Don't worry about it.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, don't worry about it. That. You weren't expecting that, huh?
No, I wasn't.
Is that medic over here?
Yeah, I wasn't.
No, I'll tell you a story in a second, but
I'd love to.
So
I'd love to hear more.
Let's talk about the science of PPE. I think probably airway PPE is probably your most valuable, especially with sick patients. Obviously, if you want to protect yourself, you want to protect your airway. So if you don't want to get sick, masks are obviously helpful. We don't have to get into COVID of things of it, but like a mask is helpful. Blocks out bacteria from getting into your airway. Eye protection is obviously a little bit helpful too, because it'll get into your eyes as well, and you get as equally safe. But gloves, unless you have cuts on your hands or your hands are all jacked up, like it doesn't do a lot of protection for you. It's actually more for the patient than it is for you.
Really?
Yeah, just because let's think about this. You've got a serious wound to the leg, and you're going to put direct pressure on that wound. The person that's at highest risk is the person with that wound, because you're going into their vascular space to protect them. So obviously it's going to help them from getting infections, but if you bring them in, they're likely going to get antibiotics, things like that preemptively anyways.
Right.
And if you don't have gloves, stopping the bleeding is way more valuable than worrying about that infection. You're likely not going to get a disease on your hands from the blood and the muscles and the things that are in their body. So in my opinion, gloves are kind of a thing that protects them more than it protects you. And gloves sit in a box. There's bacteria in the box. I mean, it's like the bacteria on your hands is probably the same that box of gloves did on your belt, that it was in your pocket for 10 years and then you decided to pull it out and they're still kind of dusty. And, I don't think the bacteria change. The body is pretty amazing at protecting you from bacteria. So I think in my opinion, I think PPE kind of has its place, and in a trauma setting, it just doesn't seem to have a whole lot of. There's not a lot of things in there that's going to add. And then the story I was going to tell you is we have medical directors, residents that work for what we call OEM, which is our like medical team that gives us the ability to practice as paramedics and EMTs in the Milwaukee County. So they have all our protocols that are written out. The doctor says, hey, this is what I want all my paramedics in my area to be doing. And I sign off saying that they can do these skills. So not every community has this, even though we're all certified through National Registry to certain skills, not every county allows you to practice all those skills. So there's some things in the Milwaukee County that we can't do that maybe some of the rural parts of Wisconsin can do. So that being said, they are available to us in the Milwaukee area. So like we can call them on the radio if we have a question on something or something unique is going on. They're always available on the radio. Well, sometimes they'll go out and they'll actually respond on certain calls. So they'll get on the radio, they'll be driving around the Milwaukee County and a call comes in, they'll hear it and they'll be like, that's something I want to go to. They'll drive their vehicle emergent and go to it. And a lot of times we already have the patient in the ambulance when they get there because they're not, driving at they're not in the area. They might be in Milwaukee County, but they're not in Brown Deer, Wisconsin. So it might take them a while to get there. But we had this one call happen where, we're in the back of the ambulance. All of a sudden the side door pops open and it's our one of our medical directors were popped in. He's like, hey guys, what do you need? And he just comes in. We had this trauma patient and, he just comes in and he was all bloody. We still had a lot of work to do because we had just gotten him into the back of the ambulance. So he's like, oh, let's see what I can help you. And he had nothing on. He just comes in his OEM jacket and that's it. And he's just coming in. We're masked up. We've got gloves. Our sleeve. We have no sleeves. We got glasses on. We're ready to go. We're prepped. And he just comes in. He's like putting direct pressure on wounds. He's throwing needles in the side. He pulls out one of his tools. He puts in a chest tube on the side and there's just blood everywhere and he's just covered in blood, no PPE. And so it's like, why is a doctor like, he should know the most. Like, why is he not wearing any PPE is what we're thinking. And it's like, sometimes it just doesn't matter. Like, I just don't think the value of PPE in some scenarios is as great as people think. It's like, oh, I got to put my gloves on. I should tuck it in my sleeves. I should put 2 layers on. My glasses, got to get those on. Get my mask on.
Yeah.
And, get all squared away before you do anything. I think depending on the situation, PPE has its place. That's what I would say.
Yeah. It's kind of refreshing to hear that, honestly, because I think so many people in the medical field are like, oh, always,
Yep.
And I tend to agree with you. Actually, most of my real world experience, I didn't have anything on, it was just my bare hands. So, I mean, I had clothes on, but I didn't have anything on.
I was
just stripped down, dude. Let's take care of this trauma situation. I'm gonna stop this bleed.
I think more often than not, you're not going to be prepared with the appropriate PPE as a bystander. If that's who we're talking to, people who want to be ready to get. You're not going to have what you want. Just get in there and get dirty.
Especially when you're talking about like a massive hemorrhage, like arterial bleeds. I mean, you've got it's a seconds game, Like a lot of people don't realize, like if you have a fully severed femoral artery, that's your artery in your leg, and you don't have a lot of musculature to slow that down. I mean, you've got, in some cases, 60 to 90 seconds before you've lost too much blood. That's on average, it's about 5 liters of blood in the human body, but you've really only got about 2 that you're working with, because once you lose over 2, you're in stage 3 shock, and it's almost irreversible at that point. I mean, stage 4 technically is irreversible, but stage 3, which is progressive, I believe, is it's almost always
the window
too
between
far.
the 3 and 4 is very very short.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, your blood can travel through your body in somewhere around 45 seconds. So if you think about it that way, it's like from heart to all around your body and back to your heart, it's like 45 seconds. So think how quick you can lose that,
it's especially
like
how
in a
fast
large
can
artery.
Right.
High pressure, large artery. I mean, that's going to be quick.
How fast can you really pull a kid out and put your gloves on before you can get direct pressure? I mean,
by the time
maybe real quick, but you're probably talking 10 to 15 seconds right there, maybe even more, and that's if you're freaking moving, I think. So what do you think about like bloodborne pathogens though? Is that like a concern? Like if you're someone like me, this is kind of always something I've thought about. Like I get my cuticles and stuff are always like, I got cracked fingers and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's like bloodborne pathogens are a thing nowadays. So
obviously,
I think they're more of a thing than they ever were before. But people are nasty out here, dude.
Yeah,
we got nasty people out in these streets.
Nasty world I live in here. Sick people.
Yep.
Obviously you're gonna be safer with PPE.
Yeah,
because it's gonna protect you.
Because I don't care. Honestly, I don't care about the patient when it comes to like. I mean, I do obviously, or otherwise I wouldn't be helping them. But when it comes to like them getting an infection, that's why the surgeons get paid the big bucks.
Right.
You know, it's from a first responder perspective. I'm not, you know, if I got some dusty old nitrile gloves, like, whatever.
Right.
They're already bleeding on the side of the road or whatever it is, you know.
They've got bigger things to worry about than your dusty gloves. Yeah, for sure. It's obviously going to help with bloodborne. You know, your body does a great job, but sometimes, you know, it'll happen. It can happen. So if you really are concerned about it, then I'd say put the gloves on and get after it. I mean, if you're going to take that extra 15 seconds, then great. If you're really concerned, whatever increases the chance of you helping, I guess.
That's a good way to look at it.
So if you're like, I don't want to touch anybody unless I've got gloves on, then put gloves on every single time.
And actually have gloves on you.
If you are thinking, I want to make the biggest impact that I can and it's going to take me longer to get my gloves on, then don't put your gloves on, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Use your big boy brain.
Yeah. Just like make the decision or have a game plan before you get in there. And just like carry gloves in your pocket all the time or don't, or whatever, you know, however you set up your gear.
Do you guys have, and Steven, you might be able to speak to this a little bit because I know we definitely have it here, but do you guys see much of the fentanyl problem? Because I know that's another concern people have had as far as wearing gloves is lots of fentanyl getting used in drugs and stuff like that.
Yeah, that is always a concern. Obviously, if you assessing the situation is a big one. If you have a concern that there is some sort of, you know, narcotic or drugs around, obviously you want to secure the scene. We don't want people coming in and having it. So like if you think it's unsafe, then don't do anything because that's fine. Because what will happen, let's say it is unsafe. You move forward. Now we have 2 patients.
Yeah.
And so then you're dividing a team that had originally 1 and you're dividing them in half because now they have a triage situation where we got now 2 patients and we got to figure out what's going on. So if you think it's dangerous, don't get involved. It's the same mentality that we have. We always want to keep the person that's going to cause help. We try to keep them safe as well. Because if they're not safe, then we don't have them at all. So, I mean, it's very similar in our fire service. If we aren't safe, we'll call PD. They'll indicate whether it's safe or not, and then we'll come in. So I would hope that bystanders have the same mentality. If they don't feel like it's a safe scenario to be in, there's drugs or whatever, there's paraphernalia, they don't know if this person's got what on them, then just don't get involved. That's fine. If you feel comfortable getting involved and you think it is safe or potentially safe or you can make it safe, then get in there. But we don't want you to get hurt and then we have to take care of you as well. So I would say try to make sure it's safe or not. So
yeah, no, I'm glad you went there. I mean, we should have gone there a lot earlier, honestly.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean that goes too for like fumes. Like if you see a lot of fumes and stuff like that, err on the side of caution because there's some things that, you know, you breathe it in once and you're done. So, you know, you got to pay attention to things like that. Like there's a video that we've seen in trainings of like, I think was it chlorine gas or something like that?
Yeah.
And it's heavier than oxygen. So it's like the fumes come out and it's super low across the ground.
Yep.
And it was a traffic stop, or I'm sorry, it was a
police officer being a first responder.
Yeah, to a car crash.
Yep.
And it was a truck that had overturned and was carrying chlorine gas, and it was coming out. And actually, I want to say it was in Wisconsin. It might have been.
Very possibly. I've seen this video.
It was a trooper, and he ran, or maybe it was Indiana or something like that. But he ran up. He saw the overturned truck. There was a guy laying outside his truck, just laying on the ground, and then there was a van that was involved in the car accident as well. A woman laying next to it appeared to be unconscious. So he ran up, you know, getting on the radio, got 2 patients on, and then as soon as he gets on the radio, he starts coughing, starts like hacking, tries to get out of it, and just falls over, and none of them made it. They all died. And
that's crazy.
So it's like, you know, he probably just thought it was smoke. I mean, my first reaction watching it, I'm like, oh, like, what's going on? It's smoke. But, you know, little things like that, like the fact that smoke always smoke's lighter, so smoke usually goes up.
Yep.
Whereas that gas, you know, it was like super low and rolling across the ground because it's heavier than air. So little things like that you can pay attention to. But again, that gets into a whole, you know, there's so many what ifs, and that's a big can of worms as far as like, I usually tell people in our class, like, you're not a detective, you know, you're a responder. So you got to use common sense, but your job isn't to figure out like exactly what happened here.
Right.
You know, you need to just make quick decisions.
Kind of like when you were talking about positions, you know. Yeah, positions are going to work for a lot of different things.
Right.
Like, it's going to, like, you don't have to figure out exactly what's going on, but doing something is better than doing nothing. So,
yeah. I would say that would go alongside with CPR's scene safety. Like, I think a lot of CPR harps on that too.
Yep.
And then especially when you get into BLS, like you could probably think about your EMT training. It's like those first 5 things: scene safe.
Yeah.
BLS, scene safe, or BSI, scene safe.
Yeah. BSI.
How many
for my
patients?
buddy and I.
Yep, exactly. BSI, scene safe. How
Dude,
many patients do I have?
Into you.
Do I need any other resources?
Yeah.
And then what's my mechanism, nature of illness? Boom. There's your first 5 things in your training. So it's like one of them is BSI, scene safe. So even though I'm saying don't worry about your gloves, that's one of the things in there is BSI, scene safe.
They harp on it a bunch.
So so scene safety is a big one. And then looking for knowing what you're looking for is a good one. And if you have multiple patients, why do I have multiple patients? Why do I have multiple people down? So those are things that you would want to look for. Anything weird laying around, like there's needles laying around, there's guy's still got like a tourniquet on his arm, whatever it is. Those are things that you want to look for. Make sure you're not endangering yourself and causing yourself to be an additional patient and putting yourself in harm.
Yeah.
Really. So I think critical thinking, taking a second, is valuable, because you do think about those things as like, every second counts. Like a lot of that thing is harped. We just talked about it for a while, talking like, get after it, be helpful. But at the same time, you do want to take a second to figure out what's going on. So you don't endanger yourself, because you can cause harm to yourself and more work for other people coming along. So
for sure. So kind of getting into some other medical gear stuff. What about bleeding control? What kind of things can we be carrying for dealing with bleeding?
Your 2 hands are extremely valuable. Direct pressure. I mean, you guys probably learned that in your classes and harp on that in your classes. Direct pressure is extremely valuable. And direct pressure doesn't always mean just putting your 2 hands over the hole. Direct pressure means pressure. So those 2 hands digging in there and putting a lot of pressure on can do a lot of damage. So even if you carry nothing, direct pressure is so valuable in slowing the bleed. Might not stop it, but slowing it can be a big deal, especially if it's a large artery. That direct pressure can be huge. Obviously, a tourniquet's going to be the thing that just clamps it right down, and knowing how to use it. I think the tourniquet can scare people, just because you might get training on it, but the tourniquet is a thing that you need to constantly practice on. So even if you get trained on it, and I would suggest, if you do carry one, I would suggest you should be pulling that out weekly and just play with it for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is. Just because it's a skill, it's something that you need to do quickly, and it's a skill that under extreme stress can be hard to do appropriately, and it's something that when applied appropriately is really skillful or really helpful. When applied poorly can be a pain in the butt for the next steps. Is that it could do nothing, or it could be in the way for the next thing. So we're not going to remove it, but it might be in the spot we want it to be in for putting another one on. If it's not doing the right job. So practicing on those is big, but tourniquets are valuable. We don't deal a lot with in the urban setting with people carrying additional equipment as bystanders, but I think tourniquet would be the one, and your hands are huge. Just direct pressure, I would harp on, is so valuable.
Yeah.
Obviously around here, where you're going to run into things like that, response time is going to be greater than 26 minutes, it sounds like, around here. So carrying more would be obviously more valuable.
I think that's the state average. So that includes because I think in town it's pretty fast.
Yeah.
We looked up what the Kenai Peninsula was, and I think it was 11 minutes.
It's pretty good, because we have so many fire departments around here. It's crazy how many we have, and
I think it's like awesome. 11 minutes here in town.
Actually,
that's
very
great.
well funded
that's great.
as well.
That's awesome.
Our fire departments are no joke. Especially in Nikiski, it's like, what in the world? These guys got everything.
That's awesome. It's awesome. That's what you want.
That's because of all the oil field stuff out there.
Yeah.
So they're well funded. But
good.
Yeah, we're big on tourniquets. We harp on them a lot in our class. I mean, I've just seen them work so many times, like in the real world, and it's crazy how well they work when applied correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, for students that take our class, we give away, they earn a a training tourniquet, so they get to keep that. And we,
Sweet.
Try to tell them like, this is a perishable skill. Like, you need to practice putting it on, especially for self-aid. I mean, again, it's a seconds game. If you're dealing with a situation where you need to put a tourniquet on, which is arterial bleed in an extremity, that's when you're going to use a tourniquet. Then the amount of time you have before you're going to become mentally altered due to blood loss is very short. And I think it's important for people to understand that, if you do get shot or stabbed, or, you're working on a construction site and a piece of metal slides and falls and you get cut by it, there's so many things that can happen. Car accident.
Right.
It's like that line between you having the mental clarity to apply that tourniquet and apply it right, and not being able to do that is pretty thin. It's a pretty fine line. So,
sure. Yeah.
I like that you said train often with them.
Most TCCC approved tourniquets have like training tourniquets too, so you can get like the blue colored ones. So you, like, obviously don't use your one that you plan to use, like, because they're usually a one-time use thing. But
keep it fresh.
But yeah, definitely have a training one that's the same brand or type or whatever.
Yep. I mean, it's the same thing with us. Like, even though we're medical professionals, there's skills that we just don't do that often. Tourniquets is one of them, honestly. We do not do a lot of emergency tourniquets as you would think in our area. And so it's a skill that, like, we have to practice to stay up on. There's a lot of skills, like, even like, we don't see a lot of pediatric calls in comparison to adult calls. We got to stay up to date on what's going on in pediatric. So just as those are a couple examples. Some of the fire skills that we have to practice just because we don't see that skill very often,
Yeah.
So things like firefighters down, like, those are things we have to practice just because we want to be ready for when it comes. So same thing for you guys. It's like, be ready to go with whatever you carry. Know how to use it, practice with it, be familiar with it, be ready to go. So that it's not.
I think people get pretty intimidated, but you kind of brought up people are scared of tourniquets. And I think one of the biggest reasons is they think it's going to lead to an amputation. And that's a misconception I wanted to kind of squash real quick. Yeah. So several years ago, like, getting into the decades ago, actually, it's been a while, but that would be true. You had a few hours, and then it was going to start to look pretty bad as far as keeping that limb. But our medical intervention and our medical kind of technologies have improved so much that window's gone up to 8 to 16 hours. I mean, you can, in most situations, you can comfortably have a tourniquet on a patient for, like I said, 8 to 16 hour period. And even beyond that, there's a lot of studies that say you can get up to 16 hours without any kind of nerve function loss or damage and anything like that. So making full recoveries with that limb. The biggest reason for that is, like, they do basically like limb isolated blood transfusions and stuff like that now to kind of bring that limb back, which is obviously surgical. But so don't hesitate as far as, any kind of massive hemorrhage in an extremity. That tourniquet should be one of the first things you do. The first thing you should do is obviously direct pressure, but if you've got a tourniquet on you, then get that thing out and get it applied.
Absolutely. And
just for keeping it simple, I mean, I'm not sure if you guys do like 2 to 3 inches above or not, but above the injury, but to keep it simple, just high and tight. Very top of the limb, crank that thing down until the bleeding stops and you're good to go. So, yep. Do you guys do 2 to 3 inches above?
We do high and tight.
Oh, you do high and tight?
Yeah.
That's actually awesome to hear. Yeah. It's funny how many, like, paramedic teams or like ambulance crews I've talked to a lot recently that they used to do, they used to be very careful about tourniquet application and 2 to 3 inches above the wound site and stuff like that, as long as you're not on any joints. But now it's so many of them have gone, it's automatically applied and it's high and tight. It's kind of,
it keeps going back and forth. It's a little bit like the CPR thing.
Yeah.
It's like
medicine's always changing.
And the fight high and tight with some time, 2 to 3 or something like that.
Yeah.
That was like which, I mean, I don't know.
Well, the biggest reason they did 2 to 3 was because the whole thought process behind it was, we're going to probably lose this limb, so let's lose as little of the limb as we can.
Right.
And so now with that whole thought process kind of out the window, it's like, well, just shut that leg down, or shut that arm down. Like, let's just close her off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned applying a second tourniquet. That's a thing too. I mean, obviously, you said depending on where they apply the first one, it can mess up the second one.
Right.
You always want to put above. You don't want to go below because then you start having issues with it either slipping or slipping. Yep. So, which we cover that in our class as well, because it actually is kind of hard to get that second one on. If it's so high and tight that you can't actually get that.
It's very tough. It almost goes over the top of it.
Yeah. And then you're playing the game of like windlass, like
you got to straddle your windlasses. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Can be tough.
Alternate them. So yeah, as we kind of like keep plugging away through this, kind of as we wrap up here, any airway management devices that you think are worth carrying, like in a vehicle or anything like that?
Pocket mask is always a good one. That pairs up really well with CPR. So if you're going to get CPR certified, a pocket mask is great.
It's just basically a vapor barrier, right?
Yep. That's what I would suggest. I don't know that you need much more than that, at least in my area. You might have more to say, or some of the more rural fire departments might have some suggestions on other things to carry, but at least where I'm from, pocket mask is probably all I would suggest.
Yeah.
Just to give you that vapor barrier and to be able to assist with airway in a very effective way.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing I'm a big fan of NPAs, nasopharyngeal.
Sure.
But you got to know how to put them in. So if you've had training on it, then, or if you go get training on it, then, those are light, easy to carry. You can fold them up in a wallet if you need to.
Yep.
But those are cool for like unconscious patients. You know, it's a good way to maintain an airway without having to physically do it. It kind of does it for you. And if you pair that with like recovery position, then you've got a pretty solid airway that you can maintain without hands on, which is pretty cool.
That's a good point.
Especially in rural environments. Like if you're out hunting, like, a lot of people here in Alaska go on these big multi-day hunts.
Right.
You got somebody go unconscious. One of your biggest concerns is their, them asphyxiating on their tongue. Their tongue can roll back, or their own saliva and stuff like that. An MPA can, mixed again with the recovery position, can kind of keep that tongue forward. And if there's any inflammation in the face, it can, just maintain an airway from the nose down into the throat. So, yeah.
That is a good point. That's obviously additional one. That's very helpful. Sometimes some of those, like if you get too much, sometimes you forget the basics of the skill that you're providing. You'll focus on some of those more advanced things.
Yeah.
And you can lose some of the value of continually doing CPR and the breaths, CPR breaths. And so I think the value of the CPR and breaths have so much value that sometimes the additional add of maybe like an MPA, OPA, or dropping a more advanced airway, if you are more trained, can decrease the benefits of the CPR and breaths, because you want to keep pumping on the chest, because essentially you're creating a pressure. So anytime you stop CPR, you almost got to
you lose all that progress.
Yeah, you lose all that progress.
Yeah.
So the value of that CPR is I think way more valuable than even some of those additional airway things. They actually did a study, and they found that one of the places that provided the highest recovery rates with cardiac arrests with CPR initiated by a trained professional was the casinos in Vegas, because that's all they had training was CPR certification. So they just really simple chest compressions and breaths. That's all they did, is the classic 30-2, and they had the highest percentages over fire departments, over trained EMTs, over everything else that you can think of. They were the highest, and because they kept it simple. Yeah. And so I would harp on keep it simple. And so there is value in the NPA. I'm not saying it's bad. There are certain types of patients, like overdoses. The NPA holds a ton of value, but in cardiac arrests, I think the actual compressions it's so important to stay on those compressions.
Yeah,
that some of those extra tools I don't think are as important. If you have other hands now, like if you carry one in your pocket and somebody comes along like, hey, I'm CPR certified too, I can help. He jumps in, starts crushing on some compressions. Then that's when that MPA is important. Like, oh, hey, now I got that MPA. Let's put that in. Let's get that airway a little bit more confident. Yeah. And then you can work. And then you have two people, extra set of hands. That's when that MPA goes in. So that's what I would say. So it has its place, it has its time, but I would harp on get those compressions and those breaths in.
Yeah, obviously CPR, I mean, takes priority kind of over everything, minus bleeding, but because otherwise you'll just pump all their blood out of their body.
Right.
But yeah, so I was more meaning if you got someone semi-conscious or unconscious, but they're breathing, then it's like you don't need to start jamming them with CPR. But
good point. Yeah, like an overdose where they're breathing poorly, like slowly, or a TBI where they're breathing poorly, slowly, irregularly.
And I think that just goes back to
like
having a good understanding. Like that's why you have to go take the classes and stuff like that, because
get that anatomy.
Like if you're, I mean, we see it in the gun community all the time. Guys come in and get med kits that have a bunch of stuff like chest seals, MPAs, things like that. And they're like, okay, yeah, but they never go out and do the training. So it's like, that's where I think people can get, they start looking at their tools and make it way too complicating.
Exactly.
And they end up, someone dies
missing
because
the point.
they didn't just go out and actually figure out what those tools were actually used for, and like what you should prioritize in an actual situation. Because ultimately it's like you said, unless they're bleeding, like if Josh got an arterial bleed and he's obviously not breathing and I start doing CPR, it's probably stupid if I don't at least throw a tourniquet on to kind of like at least slow up the bleeding. But at the same time, if I'm just going to go up and put an MPA in them for no reason, even though I'm going to do a head tilt chin lift when I do breaths on them to actually create an airway every time, it's like he doesn't really need to breathe right now. Like he needs his heart to work.
Right. Exactly.
And like you said, your blood's oxygenated, so even just compressions only. If you don't have a barrier or you don't feel comfortable doing mouth to mouth, doing rescue breaths, that person's got oxygen in their blood that you're going to circulate by doing compressions. So, yeah. Anything? Are you a fan of people having like individual first aid kits or like medical kits in their cars? Do you think that's valuable, or do you think it kind of falls back into overcomplicating things?
No, I don't think so. I carry one in my car. So I think as a bystander, I think it's a valuable thing to have.
Yeah. I think it's like going back to what we were just talking about, though. If you haven't gone out of your way to get the training, then it could just make it more complicating.
I agree.
So it's like, I don't know.
Like if you carry something and if you carry a kit, here's my thoughts on it. If you carry a kit, you should understand what everything in that kit's for and how to use it. And if there's something there you don't understand, then you either need to go get training on it or you need to take it out of your kit. That's kind of, I know that's kind of black and white, but
that's perfect.
Because some people, I've had some customers kind of argue that concept with me. Like they've come in the store and been like, well, my thought process is if I've got it and someone else knows how to use it, then I got it for them. And it's like, well, cool, but hopefully that other person that you're talking about is EMS, and then they're not going to use your kit anyways. They're going to move it out of the way, and they're going to use their stuff.
There's a good chance if somebody else knows how to use it, they probably have one of their own, or they're fire EMS, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I see that. I see that argument with like the needle D a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to use it, but I keep one in the kit because someone could know how to use it. It's like,
yeah. Technically, you can't use one of those until I believe you have to be paramedic level, but like you're probably certified to use one, I would guess.
Yep. Yeah. That might fall in one of those things outside of Good Samaritan. I'm not exactly sure if you do something that's
outside.
That's invasive. Yeah.
That's a little bit.
Yeah, that one's not that one.
I do it for you though, Jacob. So
yeah.
I hope you do it.
I wouldn't. I'm just kidding.
I would do it for you.
I do it for you.
Yeah.
Well, Josh could do it and not actually get sued over it.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, does it get weird with your, like, you got to practice within wherever you're...
Yeah, probably. I think if it went to court, I think I'd be fine.
Yeah, you probably would.
Because they are on the side of, like, good
Hey,
intent.
I'm getting sued over saving someone's life, so
that's true.
It's like, you never know.
You just never know.
Yeah. Mr. Getting sued over here, Steven.
Yeah. How many people can say that? Not very many.
Stealing cheese curds from Lambo, so...
Yeah,
look out for
that.
That's
still wild to me, though. Like, you did CPR, you actually saved the person, and you're somehow getting sued over it. That doesn't make any sense.
It's just people want money.
Yeah. That's a story for a different time.
Different time.
Yeah. It's all good, though. It's getting taken care of.
Yeah.
But anything else? Any other thoughts or things you wanted to point out as we kind of draw to a conclusion?
I don't think so. I think to wrap up the idea, I think we harped on it pretty well, is like bystanders valuable.
Yeah.
Small amount of training goes a long way, and there's a lot of value in doing a little. So that's what I think, to wrap it up. Like, we talked about a lot of different things, tools, stuff you can learn, stuff you can not learn. You can know nothing, and as long as you're willing, you are extremely valuable. So
yeah, and I think
that
everyone should start with a little, because a little does a lot.
Yeah.
And it also opens the door, kind of like what we were saying, where people get interested in like, oh man, I actually kind of like this. Like I want to keep growing off of this. And the more people that are individually prepared, the better off, you can be.
Yeah.
So,
and I think if you're one of those people that's just like, no, I'm not a servant in that way, you got to feel it. I think in doing this job and jobs you guys have done, you understand the pleasure and the joy you experience from helping people when incredible. They need you. It's just, I think it's what makes me love my job the most. It's actually a lot of guys in our job, since it's 80% of what we do is EMS and 20% of what we do is fire, they just get really annoyed at EMS because it can be really redundant and irritating and just repetitive. So they just get tired of it. It's still my favorite part of my job because of those calls that we go on, and you do make a difference. It's just like I almost like seek them out, just because it's like there's so much joy you get in seeing someone experience relief, or you get them to the place they need to be, and you get an email from the hospital saying, hey, the STEMI you brought us, they're doing great.
That's awesome.
I was always wondering if do you get back?
Yeah, we get feedback. If it's a critical call, we can request it to the hospital we send it to, or we can do what we call a CQIP, which we send it to our medical directors, and then they'll find the call. They'll research it for us, and then they'll send back what they find. And
that's good to know.
And do, or they'll do. There's sometimes we'll do Zoom meetings with the medical director, and they'll talk about it. Especially even if it's something we were like unsure of, or something didn't go well, and we want to train on it, we'll go over things like that. But yeah, there's just so much joy. So my encouragement would be like, try it, feel it, and you'll realize like, hey, I did something, and this is awesome. Like I'm benefiting people other than myself. Like it's just, there's a lot of joy in loving on others in a servant way.
For sure.
I think.
Yeah, come get some training. I mean, not
for
to
sure.
Not to just broadcast ourselves here, but we do first aid, CPR, AED, and BLS. But the thing we're super passionate about is definitely our trauma response training.
Cool.
It's not like nationally accredited. It's just education information. It's based around TCCC, so the Committee for Tactical Combat Casualty Care. So very trauma forward, but we go over a lot of first aid stuff. We've got classes coming up all the time. I will link those in our description. Definitely sign up. Remember, if you use the discount code Minuteman, you will get a discount, and it goes for that class as well. So if you're in the area, even if you live like up north, Anchorage Valley area, we're running classes all the time. Definitely check it out. We'd love to have you. It's for me, I won't speak for Steven, but for me, it's my favorite class to teach. Like I love the firearms training and the security consultation stuff we do. I like that too, but man, there's so much fulfillment in seeing that light bulb come on and like giving people the tools necessary, especially when they're looking at their kit and they start telling you like, now I understand like this stuff. I've just had my tourniquet in the wrapper for so long, and now I know how to use it. I'm pulling it out. I'm going to get the timestamp like pulled off to the side, and
it's awesome.
There's just things like, oh, that's what ETD is, like that stuff just makes me so happy. It's so much fun. So definitely come check that out. I'll link some videos too to our YouTube, because we've got a full video on CPR. It's about 10 minutes long. If you don't know anything about CPR, I encourage you to watch it. There's also a ton of other videos that will just come up from other people that are really good. And it's amazing what you can learn on YouTube now. So I encourage you, though, to go get CPR first aid AED training, because going hands-on, I think I'm a huge believer in hands-on, like getting physical hands-on with something and actually going through the motions. You've already done it, so you don't have to try to figure it out on the fly in a real world life or death situation. It's something you've already done, so you've got that repetition kind of logged away. I usually attribute it to making a shortcut on your desktop, on your computer. Mm-hmm. It's like, instead of having to like go through and figure out where that file is, you just create a shortcut, double click it, you're good to go. It's kind of the same thing. If you've already gone through it before, then you remember it, you can jump right back into it. So get the training. I'll try to have some stuff in our description. Josh, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think it went great. It's awesome. Get to spend a little family time together.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, dude, you want to sit down and do a podcast? He's like, sure. What are we going to talk about? I was like, let's talk about medical stuff. He's like, dude, let's do it. So
cool.
Stoked to have you. I think it went awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.